is the planet's ultimate game. The final of the 21st Football World Cup. Flicked in by Griezmann and flicked on! And France take the lead in the World Cup final!
Hi and welcome to the first episode of the brand new Arab News World Cup podcast. I'm your host, Geordie Pete Redding, and with me is Arab News sports editor Ali Khaled. Over the coming weeks, we'll be looking at all things Qatar 22, and we'll be kicking off the first episode with a look at the four Arab nations taking part, of course, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the hosts, Morocco and Tunisia. Today's guest is one of the most respected and knowledgeable football journalists in the Middle East. But before we get to him, a warm welcome to Ali. AK, how are you?
I'm very well. Very excited about this, Pete. Obviously, you and I do our weekly Newcastle podcast, but this is great, for the next few weeks. Really looking forward to the World Cup, starting to get really sort of, you can feel the excitement now, and especially where we are, in this part of the world, a lot of people making their plans to go to the World Cup. I think obviously as the first ever World Cup in the Arab world, Hopefully the Arab teams who we're going to be discussing today will get a lot of support, whether it's from people traveling to support them from around the region, from their own home countries, or for people who already live in Qatar. Obviously big Arab communities there will get behind them, and support the Arab teams. But we're going to be discussing not just the Arab teams, of course, in the coming weeks. We're going to be discussing all the teams. We're going to be discussing the favorites. We're going to be discussing the underdogs. We're going to have a look back at memorable moments from previous World Cups. So plenty to look forward to.
A World Cup greatest show on the planet, memory lane. That would be good. Look forward to that one. You are right though, Ali. There's a different dynamic about this World Cup. We've experienced a few. We won't give that away, otherwise it'll give our age away. But we've experienced some World Cups between us. But I don't think I can recall an excitement from me personally for this one, because it is in our backyard, basically. So who better to have with us than the founder of the excellent Middle East football website, Adaf, than Wael Jabir, to discuss the progress of the Arab nations and their chances at the World Cup. Wael, welcome, and how are you?
Well, thank you for having me on board. And I'm looking forward to this new journey with you guys, and excited as well to be part of this new podcast.
Speaking of journeys, Wael, you're going to be journeying because you're going to be there. You're going to be right in the thick of it, aren't you?
I will be, yes. Very excited. My first World Cup on the ground, actually. So, kind of a big deal. And as you mentioned, yes, I share your sentiment. Obviously, the first World Cup in our backyard. And as someone who was born and raised and grew up in this part of the world, there is huge excitement about this World Cup.
Four Arab teams, including the hosts, in the first ever World Cup on Arab soil, as we say. How much of a factor do you think will be playing at home for the Arab nations?
Well, it's an interesting one because last year I was in Qatar for the Arab Cup, which was right around the same time, and obviously had all four Arab teams. And the support that Morocco and Tunisia had was just incredible. Of course, Qatar is the home country, and you expect full stadiums for every game. You expect a lot of support. That's normal. But Tunisia and Morocco, especially given they're not exactly geographically close to Qatar, they have huge expat populations in Qatar, so stadiums were full. The atmosphere they created around the stadiums, around the city, was just amazing. And that was just the Arab Cup, with all due respect. Being the World Cup, I think that's a whole other level.
Absolutely. Ali, wanted to come to you. Let's look at Saudi. They take on Messi and co in the first match, but after that they've got Poland and Mexico. They're competing in the sixth FIFA World Cup, second in a row as well. How do you fancy their chances compared to that of 2018?
I think the team is better. I think the coach is better. I think the team is obviously more experienced. A lot of these players did play 4 years ago. It's a very tough group. I mean, it's really, really tough to kick off against Argentina. I mean, who are one of the favorites.
Nobody
South
wants
American
that.
Champions. Nobody. They're the South American champions. One of the favorites. Messi is going for his last World Cup. This is his last chance. So it couldn't have been tougher. It's absolutely the toughest possible start. I mean, the only thing I can think of is in terms of, giving themselves a chance is the second match, trying to get a point in the second match against Poland. So when you go into the third match against Mexico, you've got something as tough as the last match will be against Mexico, who themselves are an excellent team, at least you have something to play for in the last match, try and get something from that. Obviously a win would be an incredible achievement, Listen, I'm not suggesting it's impossible against Argentina. It's just very, very tough. So, I mean, you think at least a point from these opening two games, and more likely that second match. And I mean, like I said, in 4 years ago, by the time they played Egypt in their last match, Saudi Arabia, both teams were out. It was a dead rubber. Saudi Arabia did end up winning, which is something to take home. But it was a dead rubber, and it's the last time an Arab team actually won in the World Cup match. But ultimately, it's still a disappointing campaign. This time, it would be great to get into the last match with something to play for.
I've got to ask you, Ali, and it might sound like a silly question, but it's something that, because it's World Cup and because it's so unique, does pre-World Cup experience count for anything or nothing because of that 4-year gap? Is there a way that they can take with them into this one experience that they've had from prior tournaments?
I see what you mean. Like it's long time enough that it might not have a direct bearing, but these players become a bit battle hardened. The more they've played in tournaments together. Look, Saudi, a lot of these players, or say the under 23 team, played in the Olympics last year, but 3 of the senior players played in. And they performed well. They lost all 3 matches in Japan, but they actually performed really, really well. So again, like playing in the last World Cup, playing in the Asia Cup, playing in the Olympics, it gets the players like used to tournament football. For sure, it makes it improves them and all that, and gives them that experience. A lot of these players will go into this tournament, with their eyes wide open, like far, far more experience than when they went in 4 years ago.
Wael, coming back to you, Saudi qualified very impressively. Do you think that the team are made of sterner stuff under coach Hervé Renard? Do you think that's going to carry some bearing for them?
Yes, indeed. Of course, in the qualifiers, they topped their groups. They qualified with 2 games to go, and it wasn't an easy group as well. They qualified ahead of Japan and Australia, so 2 of the most difficult teams in the continent, 2 very experienced sides. And let's also remember that this is the first time Saudi Arabia makes it to back-to-back World Cups since 2002-2006. So that's significant improvement, and I think yes, this team has improved a lot under Hervé Renard. So he's an experienced manager. He's 2 times African Cup of Nations winner with 2 different teams. He's been with Morocco in 2018. So he's someone who knows how to build a winning mentality within a team. So I think that will count for a lot for Saudi.
It's actually very interesting you say that, because he's a character that does know the drill, so that will stand them in good stead. Staying with you, Wael, this is a moment 12 years in the making for Qatar, our hosts. There's a lot of fanfare off the pitch, and we're all feeling the excitement for Doha and Qatar. But let's talk about things on the pitch. How do you see it going for the hosts?
It is, yes. It's a moment 12 years in the making, probably even longer for some of the players. I know they were awarded the World Cup in 2010, but even some of the players have been part of this project since earlier than that. Interestingly, I think this could play out one of 2 ways, because I don't think I've ever seen any team prepare for a World Cup as much as Qatar have done. Okay. They've been in closed training camps since June. So none of those players have actually been playing league football at all this season. And to think that some of these players actually went through academies, through under 16s, under 90s, with just these 3 games in mind. And obviously with the perspective of making them more than 3 games, making it into the second round. This is a lot of pressure. If you ask me, if your entire career is being geared towards playing one tournament at home, I think this is incredible pressure. They did well to build a strong team, technically, tactically. They competed in the Copa America, they competed in the Gold Cup, in the CONCACAF, they competed even in the European qualifiers. So this is unprecedented preparation for a World Cup. My only concern here is the mental aspect of it. Will they be able to take all that pressure?
It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure, isn't it? Ali, you covered the 2019 AFC Asian in the UAE, which Qatar won. Having seen them since then and over the years, do you think it's the best Arab team that's been set up for a World Cup? Just following on from how Wael says their preparations are.
Yeah, I think it's the valid point here is what Wael was talking about in terms of like no team. Are they the best ever Arab team? I'm not sure about that, although they're very, very good, going into the tournament, like compared to like previous Arab teams, of course, I'm talking about here. They have been together for a very long time, like they've grown up together, and obviously they won the Asian Cup, here in the UAE. But the point that Wael was making, I think, is the more important one here. Is like the actual preparation. Everything isn't. Every single factor has been looked after. Like every single resource has been used. Every single facility has been used. The players have. There's no team I think has ever been as well prepared. They're playing at home. Obviously in front of their own fans in stadiums that they've played in before. Like I said, I mean, it is the first time, since the first ever World Cup that a team comes into the, hosts a World Cup, plays a World Cup, having never played in it before, So there's that angle. But I think everything else really is in their favor, So, they've been given every chance to try and perform on the pitch, I think that will play out well for their opening match against Ecuador, the opening day. I do think that's a massive chance for them. I mean, we were talking about Saudi Arabia needing to get a point to go into the last match with something to play for. I think Qatar really need to win that opening match, and if they do, they'll give themselves a chance.
I fancy them. I really do, just because of the occasion. That, like you say, it's their debut in a World Cup. I really fancy them. I think if that crowd get behind them, no disrespect to Ecuador, but I think Qatar have got a seriously good chance to get themselves up and running.
Yep.
While there's no easy groups in this World Cup, certainly for the unfancied teams, but how do you see Morocco faring against Belgium, Canada, and Croatia in Group F?
Morocco are an interesting one. In terms of groups, I think this World Cup group is slightly easier than the one they were dealt 4 years ago when they had to play Spain and Portugal as well as Iran. They came out of that group with a point, impressively against Spain, actually, 2-2 draw. I think in terms of group, it's a little bit easier. It's not easy for sure, especially when you're playing a team with the quality of Belgium. Canada are an up-and-coming team with a lot of talents. However, with Morocco, I think one of the key things was that they've recently had a managerial change, and a lot of things have changed for some of the players. Some of the players positively, the likes of Hakim Ziyech coming into the national team setup, having been excluded by the previous coach. So there is a lot of change. Whether they manage that change and channel it positively in the World Cup, and whether they take that opportunity going into the World Cup with a local coach, it would be interesting to watch.
While does their ranking, I think they're currently at 24th, does that stand them in good stead as well? I mean, if you go back even to 98, they were ranked 10th. So out of the out of our Arab nations teams, they've got to be probably the most fancied, would you say?
Well, if you look purely on rankings, yes. The group is not easy, easier than 4 years ago, but it's not easy. The changes around the team. However, those are, I think, out of the Arab teams, they're definitely the team with the most experienced players playing in European leagues. They have a lot of players playing at the top level. And I reckon that type of experience will help them a lot. So I think Morocco do have a chance to make it to the next round.
Well, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Obviously, Hakim Ziyech has been an issue because previously he was out of the squad for a year, I think more than a year. having issues with the coach. Now he's back in. Do you see him being one of like sort of the pivotal players for Morocco, or do you think him having issues at Chelsea, not being first choice, and having those problems, maybe the World Cup has come a little bit too soon for him, or will he? Do you think he'll come good on the day? And a quick word on Ashraf Hakimi as well, who's one of the big stars.
Yes, I think within those two names, Morocco have top quality players. I don't think any of the other Arab teams have players playing at that level, have players of the quality of Ashraf Hakimi and Hakim Ziyech. With Ziyech, yes, he's had problems with the previous coach. He's coming from the cold. Hasn't played as much with Chelsea, which is, for me, I think it makes up for one of two situations. Either he will look at this as an opportunity to challenge himself, look at this as an opportunity to prove that he is actually that super talent that everyone has been talking about for a number of years now, and that he can do it at that level. Because the other side as well is, if he does well in the World Cup, gives him an opportunity if he's looking for contracts away from Chelsea. So I think that's something he will definitely be playing on his mind. Ashraf Hakimi, one of the best right backs in the world, no questions about it. Even from a young age, I think he's proved himself to be, arguably top 5 right backs in the world. So when you have a player of that caliber, I think you can build a lot about it. And the other aspect of it, maybe unlike Ziyech, not to be fair to Ziyech, but I think Hakimi has less issues in terms of discipline. So I reckon, he will be an important asset for Morocco in the World Cup.
Fantastic.
I'm going to stay with you, Wael. We've got you on, and it's fascinating. So we're going to utilize you to the max. But I wanted to ask you about Tunisia up against world champions France, also Australia and Denmark. Looking at that, it's another very tough assignment, isn't it, for one of our Arab nations?
It is, yes. I'm particularly excited about the game between Tunisia and France. Obviously, that's going to be a bit of a politically charged game. I think there will be
like a local derby.
It is, in a way, yes. And there is a lot of emotions that will be there on the moment between these two teams. Unlike Morocco, maybe Tunisia do not have that top level of stars playing in Europe. So I think they're a different type of side. But actually, perhaps out of all the Arab teams, I think Tunisia are the most defensively sound. They're a solid team. They like to stay compact. They like to hit on the counter. And I think playing in a World Cup, playing against teams with the quality of France and Denmark, who are one of the most impressive European sides, in my opinion, in recent months. So playing against teams of that quality, I think you need to be defensively solid first. So I think that will be something that will help Tunisia. The other thing is they do have a number of players who actually play their football in Qatar. So I think that's something that could help them, especially with someone like Ferjani Sassi, who's one of their most important players in midfield, with someone like Youssef Msakni. Those two have been playing the football in Qatar. They know the stadiums, they know the atmosphere. So I think that could be an advantage for them.
Awesome. Ali, I know that you love your football history. I mention it in all of the other podcasts and work that we do together, and it always amazes me. You're like an encyclopedia to me. But I know you've got childhood memories of Tunisia at the World Cup, so come on, share it with me.
Yeah, I mean, I know you said at the top of the show that we really shouldn't go back too much. We give away our ages, But I remember as a very, very, very young child, so Tunisia were the first ever Arab team to win a World Cup match in 1978. I remember watching it with my father very late at night. It was obviously the World Cup was in Argentina, but I was allowed to stay up and watch these games. And it was Tunisia's first ever match in the World Cup. It was against Mexico. They were in a tough group. They were with the World Cup champions, Germany, Poland, and Mexico. Nobody gave them a hope, and they were absolutely brilliant. I've seen obviously the footage. I've seen the match many times since then. So obviously my memories are not exactly from the day, but they played amazing football. They had this wonderful player called Tariq Diab, who just orchestrated like this incredible football that they played against Mexico. Abdelmajid Shatali, who's like a legendary coach as well, was in charge of the team, and they beat Mexico 3-1. Now that was the first time an Arab team has won a match. It's the first time an African team has had won a match at the World Cup, So they've had, they have that, historical fact in their favor. They've got the pedigree of playing in quite a few World Cups. Things were never as good as that, I think they had a great World Cup. They even drew with West Germany in that World Cup, who were the champions at the time. Didn't qualify for the second round, but
how
said,
not? I mean, you beat Mexico 3-1, and you get a draw with Germany. What went wrong there? Was it just complacency?
Well, no, I mean they lost to Poland, I think. Don't forget, those were the days of 2 points for a win. I think a draw and a win these days gets you almost there. But they just missed out. Didn't qualify for the second round, and but yeah, I mean, like I said, they've got this history behind them, and things, they haven't really hit those heights in the World Cups that they've played since. But hopefully, again, we hope this time they'll be, as Wael said, they've been a little bit under the radar, Tunisia this time, and another point just to add to what Wael was saying is that they've got quite a few playing in Qatar, and also like the coach they've quite relied heavily, more than Morocco and like Algeria probably do, on players who play at home, rather than going after a lot of sort of dual nationality Tunisian players who might play for France or Tunisia. They've actually relied on home players and all that. Maybe possibly because they don't have as much choice as say Algeria or Morocco, but that hasn't failed them. It's been a successful policy. They got to the World Cup, and we wish them the best.
I've got a question for both of you before I come to the ultimate question. So I'll stay with you, Ali. I'll put it to you first. And it's something I'm fascinated by, although I'm based in the Middle East. I follow Western football, and I'm looking at this from a weather perspective. It's called a Winter World Cup, but even our winter here could affect the style of football that's being played. Do you think that sits as a positive for the teams, for our Arab nations, but also possibly for South Americans compared? I think what I'm getting at is the European and Western sides.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously for the Arab teams, for Qatar themselves, above all, this is what they're used to, at this time of the year. So they would be quite used to this this climate. I think it's, the climate will work. It might just be one of those factors that kind of like it will work in everyone's favor, really. I think I look at European teams or England in particular, like they just seem to get to historically they get to the World Cup and they look very, very tired, and obviously the pace at the World Cup is different than the Premier League, and it's very slower. It's in hot conditions. I mean, you remember like all these tournaments, whether in France or the USA or Italian, you're playing in really, really hot weather conditions, and the weather's going to be much better like this time around. Obviously, halfway through the season, so teams are not going to be as exhausted, and I think the weather will play its part in this. Wael was there exactly the same time last year for the Arab Cup, so he'll be able to give you probably a few more pointers. But I just think that if you go you think South America, or you think Europe, or you think the Arab nations, I think they will all be happy with how the weather should be around that time. I don't think it will be a disadvantage or too much of a big disadvantage to anyone. I can't see it being that. So Wael, I think, will shed more light on that.
Thank you, Ali. Yeah, I think honestly, this is one World Cup where it will be interesting, because obviously one of the key things is that all the stadiums in Qatar are air conditioned. So whereas weather will still play a factor in terms of players training, the training stadiums are not going to be air conditioned. And also there will be, even with the air conditioning, there will be a slight difference of temperature between the 1 p.m. kickoffs and the 10 p.m. kickoffs. As you mentioned, yes, I was there last year for the Arab Cup, which kicked off exactly on the same dates of the World Cup as a sort of test event. And it did get a bit chilly for the 10 p.m. kickoffs, actually, especially in the stadiums that are a little bit out of town. You do get a bit of a cold breeze there. So I think, yes, whereas there might be an impact in terms of weather, I think it will be more about how the players train, how the players get about. But once you come to two stadiums. It was almost the same. I remember I did the FC Champions League in Qatar a couple of years ago, and that was actually earlier in the year. I think it was around September, where the weather was a bit hotter, but it didn't feel the same. Honestly, like in stadiums, it didn't feel like it was September. You go into a stadium and you're still feeling a cool 23 degrees.
Awesome. Sounds perfect to me. Listen, you guys you've got me excited now. I wish it's not long. I know it's not far away, but I wish it was tomorrow, having talked to you both. Wael, can't let you leave without a quick prediction. Do you see any of the Arab teams progressing to the last 16?
Putting me on the spot. I think I'm going to stay optimistic. I think things are going to be a bit difficult for Saudi Arabia, a bit difficult for Tunisia as well, although I won't rule out a surprise. But I think if anyone does it, it could probably be most likely Qatar, and to a lesser extent, Morocco. I think that could be my prediction.
Interested. Listen, as is customary in our podcasts, I always give the final word to our sports editor of Arab News, rightly so, Ali Khaled. But I've named this one for you, Ali. We're gonna for this series, we're gonna call it the World Cup last word. So it's the last word, but it's a World Cup word. So round us off episode 1.
Well, it's been brilliant having Wael on.
Amazing.
Always fascinating talking to him, and his knowledge of Middle East football really is something, and it's always brilliant. And, he's a friend of ours as well. So it's always nice to talk to people, we've
Absolutely.
known for years and years, So thank you, Wael, for that. I think, just to follow up on his point, it's, I look at like the groups, and it's, the Qatar probably the one that could possibly go through, especially if they beat Ecuador, as you mentioned. Saudi Arabia, I think, are an excellent team. I really do think an excellent team. They've just been dealt a bad hand, I think playing, it's a tough group, and play Argentina first, I think the pressure is on right from the beginning. So I don't know, if I had to just choose one for now, I would say possibly Qatar, but let's hope I'm wrong, and let's hope, Saudi Arabia. I mean, if they get anything out of the Argentina game, I think it will change the atmosphere completely for Saudi Arabia. And I think, from that point on, I would fancy them massively. But like I said, they just need to get something from those first 2 matches to go into the last one with some hope. Beyond that, look, I mean, we've discussed the Arab teams now, and in the coming weeks, hopefully we'll have Wael back on at some point. We'll be discussing the favorites. We're gonna have a show about the favorites. We're gonna have a show about underdogs. As we mentioned earlier in the show, we're gonna have we're gonna look back on previous World Cups and all that. We'll look back on previous performances of these 4 teams as well. Well, not Qatar, but the other 3 teams. And I think there's just going to be so much and so much to talk about. And I just think that we're just about a month away. If we I think the news will start, like the developments, the news, everything's going to start coming in the next few weeks. It's going to be really, really exciting. We're going to have so much to talk about, I mean, in terms of like team selections, injuries, coaches, everything. So very exciting time. And look forward to the next episode.
And Arab News will keep you up to date with everything, as well as our podcast, of course, on the website. So please, can't wait to get involved for episode number 2. That's it from me, Pete Redding, on this World Cup podcast, episode number 1. Thank you, guys, and look forward to seeing you during the World Cup and to have a conversation after as well and see how well we did with our predictions. We'll see you on episode number 2.